Imagine getting a frantic message from your compliance officer on a Tuesday morning. Like a summer intern just typed a completely casual prompt into Copilot, asking for a summary of upcoming organizational changes.
Oh, man. I can see where this is going.
Right, and Copilot responds instantly. It provides this beautifully formatted, bulleted list of a highly confidential, totally unannounced corporate merger, complete with executive severance packages.
That is the ultimate nightmare scenario for an admin.
It really is. And your immediate instinct, and the instinct of basically every manager in the building, is to just slam the emergency stop button on the AI. Everyone thinks, the AI went rogue, it hacked the system, it completely bypassed our permissions.
And this is the kicker, what if the AI didn't hack anything at all?
Exactly. What if it just showed you a terrifying truth about your own network permissions? Welcome to the admin study room. We are taking all your preparation, all those late nights reading documentation, and focusing it into a final cram and scenario practice session for exam AB-900, Microsoft 365 Copilot and Agent Administration Fundamentals.
Yeah, if you're tuning in, you already know the vocabulary, you know the acronyms. But the AB-900 exam isn't going to just ask you to, define a term. It is going to put you in the exact scenario you just described, the intern and the merger document, and force you to logically deduce the root cause.
Right, you have to select the correct administrative center to fix it and maneuver around some incredibly deceptive distractor answers.
We are going to stress test your reasoning today.
Cool.
We're looking at the why behind the architecture, really translating the theory into the mechanics of what you actually click when your tenant is, falling apart.
For sure. Now, before we start tearing apart those administrative centers and mapping out the solutions, I need to share this with you. This is an independent, unofficial AB-900 study podcast from Microsoft 365 certified Copilot and Agent Administration Fundamentals. It is based on Microsoft's public learned content and is run by AI hosts. It is not affiliated with, authorized, sponsored, or approved by Microsoft.
Okay, so the foundational concept that breaks down most candidates on exam day is this massive misconception of how Copilot operates in the wild.
Oh, absolutely. There is this pervasive idea that it functions like a consumer AI bot, just floating in the cloud, scraping whatever it wants.
Yeah, but it does not exist in a vacuum. It is bolted directly to the floor of your Microsoft 365 tenant boundary.
And because it is bolted to that tenant boundary, it is entirely subservient to the existing rules, limits, and configurations of your ecosystem. Like, to control the AI, you have to control the ecosystem.
Which means you need a mental map.
A really solid mental map of the administrative centers. The exam will relentlessly test your ability to route a problem to the correct portal. So let's build that map logically, right? Based on the type of crisis you are actually trying to solve.
Let's do it.
If the scenario involves broad strokes, turning features on or off, creating user accounts, or assigning the actual Copilot license itself, your destination is the Microsoft 365 Admin Center.
That is the global switchboard.
Exactly. It also houses the Copilot Control System and, where supported, the agent inventory.
But, and this is where people trip up, if the scenario shifts from simply assigning a license to actually securing the person holding that license, the M365 Admin Center is practically useless.
Totally useless.
Right. If the question is asking you to prove a user's identity, enforce a sign-in risk policy, or manage temporary administrative access, you are routing that ticket straight to the Microsoft Entra Admin Center.
Entra is the bouncer for your entire infrastructure.
That's a great way to put it. It handles multi-factor authentication, conditional access, single sign-on, and privileged identity management.
Which brings up one of the most common and fatal traps on the AB-900. Candidates frequently blur the lines between the Microsoft Entra Admin Center and the Microsoft Purview portal.
Oh yeah, they see the word security in this scenario and just guess blindly.
They do. But the mechanism is what matters here. Entra secures the identity, the digital representation of the human trying to get in. Purview, on the other hand, secures the data.
The actual file.
Right, the emails, the intellectual property resting inside the tenant. If the exam scenario mentions sensitivity labels, data loss prevention, e-discovery, or insider risk, you are in Purview.
Purview is also the home of DSPM for AI.
Yes, data security posture management, which is a massive topic we are definitely going to unpack later.
Okay, and just to complete the security triad, you have the Microsoft Defender portal. Let's create a hard boundary here for everyone listening. If Purview is about compliance and preventing internal data from leaking out, Defender is about hunting active threats trying to get in.
That's the key difference.
Right. If the scenario describes an active phishing campaign, a compromised endpoint, Or an active incident response, that is Defender. Don't let the exam trick you into using Purview's data loss tools to hunt an active malware infection.
Rounding out the map, we have two heavily tested centers for content and customization. The SharePoint Admin Center is critical because Copilot uses documents as its primary grounding material.
It's the foundation of everything it knows.
Exactly. This portal is where you manage site sprawl, sharing permissions, and advanced tools like SharePoint Advanced Management, data access governance, and restricted access control.
And finally, as organizations mature from just, chatting with Copilot to actually building custom AI workflows, the Power Platform Admin Center becomes the focal point for managing environments and maker roles.
Right, so let's take that map and immediately apply it to a high-stakes exam trap within Entra. The exam writers love to prey on the confusion between authentication and authorization.
Oh, they sound like synonyms to a casual user, but confusing them on the test will definitely cost you points.
The distinction really comes down to the chronological timeline of a user trying to access data. Think of it like a highly secure, restricted corporate facility.
Okay, I like this analogy.
Authentication is the ID badge scanner at the very front door of the building, out on the street. When a user enters a password or approves a prompt on their Authenticator app, the system is simply asking, "Are you who you say you are? Is this credential mathematically valid?"
It just proves identity.
Yes, that is authentication. But just because you got through the front door of the building doesn't mean you can walk into the CEO's office.
Right, you're just in the lobby.
Exactly. Authorization is the encoded chip inside that badge. Once you are inside, the system checks that chip at every internal door. It asks, does this verified person have the specific permission to open this specific server room?
And this is huge for Copilot.
Massive.
Yeah.
Copilot doesn't just rely on authentication. It relies entirely on authorization to determine which SharePoint files it can read on your behalf to generate a response.
And inside that authentication process at the front door, we hit another massive conceptual trap. MFA versus conditional access. People throw these terms around interchangeably in meetings, but mechanically, they are entirely different components of the identity engine.
They are completely different. Multi-factor authentication, the physical act of typing in a 6-digit code from your phone or using a biometric scan, is just the proof. It is the physical mechanism of validation.
It's just the tool.
Right. Conditional access, though, is the policy engine operating invisibly behind the scenes. It is the intelligence evaluating thousands of telemetry signals in real time.
So when a user tries to log in,
Conditional access looks at their IP address. It asks, are they logging in from their normal office in Chicago or an unknown server in a foreign country? It looks at the device. Is this a company-managed laptop with the latest antivirus or an unmanaged personal phone?
it's doing a lot of math really fast.
Exactly. It evaluates all of this risk in milliseconds, and then the conditional access policy makes a decision. It might decide to let the user write in, it might decide to block them entirely, or it might decide to enforce the MFA mechanism to demand further proof.
So conditional access is the brain. MFA is just one of the tools the brain uses.
Saban.
Let's run a practice scenario to see how this translates to an exam question. Here's how it might read. An enterprise tenant has a strict zero-trust policy that explicitly prohibits assigning permanent global administrator rights to any user account.
Okay, setting the baseline.
Right. However, a senior engineer requires high-level administrative privileges for a scheduled 2-hour maintenance window this weekend to upgrade a core system.
Got it.
The question is, which specific tool, located in which admin center, is required to facilitate this access without violating the zero-trust policy?
The primary constraint the exam is giving you there is the prohibition on permanent rights, paired with the need for a 2-hour window. The scenario is practically screaming for just-in-time access.
We need to hand over the keys to the kingdom.
But ensure those keys disintegrate the exact moment the maintenance window closes.
The distractors here are usually going to point to role-based access control, or RBAC, the logic being, well, they need a role, so use RDAC.
And RBAC is the trap. Standard RBAC in Entra allows you to assign a least privilege role, but that assignment is generally static. It persists until an administrator manually logs back in and revokes it.
And relying on human memory to revoke a global admin role after a weekend maintenance window.
That is exactly how breaches happen.
Yeah, not good.
The precise mechanical solution for time-bound, just-in-time elevation is privileged identity management, or PIAM. And mapping it back to our earlier discussion, PIAM is a feature of identity governance, which means you will find it in the Microsoft Entra Admin Center.
So PIAM forces the engineer to request the elevation.
Provide a justification ticket number, potentially require a manager's approval, and most importantly, it automatically strips the permission away after the 2 hours expire.
That automatic revocation is the key differentiator.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's pivot now to the architecture of Copilot itself, because understanding how PM and Entra secure the user is really only half the battle. You have to understand how Copilot actually constructs a response under the hood to manage the oversharing trap.
Because it isn't just a direct pipe from the chat box to an AI model.
Far from it.
The architecture is a multi-step orchestration, and it involves 4 critical pillars: Microsoft Graph, the orchestration service, the large language models, and WorkIQ. Let's isolate Microsoft Graph first, because the exam will heavily test your understanding of what Graph actually is.
The most common failure point I see is candidates treating the graph like a massive SQL database, where all the company's files are secretly hoarded.
Right, and Microsoft Graph does not store your files. Your files live in SharePoint, OneDrive, and Exchange. Microsoft Graph is the connective tissue.
It's the map.
Yes, it is a massive API fabric that maps the relationships and signals between entities in your tenant. It maps that you, the user, had a Teams meeting with the marketing director yesterday, and that the marketing director modified a specific PowerPoint deck 3 hours ago.
It builds a semantic index of those relationships.
Exactly. When you ask Copilot a question, the orchestration service intercepts that prompt. It doesn't send it straight to the large language model.
That's a huge point.
First, the orchestration service queries the Microsoft Graph to gather all the relevant organizational context, the emails, chats, documents that the specific user has authorization to see.
It gathers that context, grounds the prompt in reality, and then sends the package bundle to the large language model for reasoning.
The LLM does the heavy lifting of understanding the language and generating the summary. WorkIQ sits on top of this, providing personalized context based on your specific historical collaboration patterns to make the answer more relevant to your daily workflow.
All of this orchestration, though, hinges on one absolute, unbreakable principle.
The golden rule of Copilot administration.
Right. Copilot strictly honors existing Microsoft 365 permissions. When the orchestration service queries the graph, it presents the user's Entra access token.
And the graph will only return data that the user is explicitly authorized to access. Copilot does not have a secret, super admin backdoor to read private files.
Which brings us right back to the scenario we opened the show with.
The intern.
The intern who asked Copilot for upcoming changes and received a summary of a highly confidential corporate merger document. The manager is freaking out, demanding Copilot be shut down because it leaked data. As the administrator analyzing this for the exam, what is the actual mechanical failure here?
The failure is pre-existing poor permission hygiene. This is the textbook definition of oversharing. The AI did not malfunction. The orchestration service queried the graph using the intern's access token, and the graph responded, yes, this intern has permission to read this merger document.
Because of a misconfiguration.
Exactly. The root cause lies in how that document was secured in SharePoint long before Copilot was ever turned on.
So what are the specific SharePoint misconfigurations an admin needs to look for when diagnosing this kind of oversharing on the exam?
The exam will typically guide you toward 3 major culprits. The first is broken permission inheritance.
Give us an example of that.
Okay, you might have a highly secure SharePoint site for executives, but an executive creates a subfolder, breaks the inheritance from the parent site, and accidentally grants read access to a broader group.
Happens all the time.
All the time. The second culprit is the proliferation of broad sharing links. A user clicks Share on the merger document, selects anyone in your organization with the link, and pastes that link into a public Teams channel or a broad email thread.
And anyone who clicks it now has access.
And Copilot indexes that access.
Yes.
The third, and perhaps most dangerous, is the misuse of default broad groups, specifically applying the everyone except external users group to a site or library that contains sensitive data. Copilot didn't create these vulnerabilities, it just indexed them.
It took a needle in a haystack, a single misconfigured file among millions, and handed it directly to the intern on a silver platter.
Precisely.
Now, when executives see this happen, their immediate reaction is to just disable Copilot tenant-wide until security is fixed. But from an architectural standpoint, why is that the wrong administrative response?
Because shutting off Copilot doesn't fix the security vulnerability. It just blinds you to it.
Yeah.
If you turn off the AI, the intern still has technical access to the merger document.
They could stumble upon it via a standard SharePoint search.
Or just by clicking a stray link. Copilot is acting as a massive audit flashlight. It is aggressively surfacing the dark, overshared corners of your tenant. By exposing that the intern had access, Copilot is giving the administrator the exact telemetry needed to go fix the broken inheritance on that specific folder.
The problem for administrators in the real world and on the exam is scale. You can't manually audit permission inheritance on 10,000 SharePoint sites.
No human can do that.
Right. If Copilot is the flashlight exposing the mess, we need industrial tools to actually clean it up, which brings us to SharePoint Advanced Management and Data Access Governance.
Exactly. When you are dealing with container sprawl, thousands of teams, thousands of SharePoint sites, you need SharePoint Advanced Management, or SAM. SAM is a suite of premium tools designed to automate the governance of the containers themselves.
And the primary weapon in SAM for preparing a tenant for Copilot is the Data Access Governance, or DAG reports.
Yes, big reports.
How do DAG reports mechanically hunt down the oversharing we just talked about? I mean, it isn't just a basic search function, right?
Not at all. DAG reports utilize the back-end telemetry of the tenant to proactively identify access risks at scale. Instead of waiting for an intern to accidentally prompt their way into a sensitive file, an administrator runs a DAG report to find the vulnerabilities first.
So it's crawling the environment.
Right. These reports crawl the environment and highlight sites that have an unusually high volume of anyone or people in your organization sharing links. They identify sites that have sensitivity labels applied, but are still using that risky everyone except external users group.
It bubbles up the worst offenders.
It aggregates all this data and provides the admin with a prioritized list of the highest risk containers, allowing them to target their remediation efforts rather than just guessing.
Finding the oversharing is step one, but SAM also provides automated lifecycle policies to shrink the attack surface, so Copilot has less garbage data to sift through.
And lifecycle policies in SAM are essential for long-term hygiene.
Yeah.
You have the inactive site policy, which monitors site activity telemetry.
Combines inactive.
If a project site hasn't had a document modified or a page viewed in, say, 6 months, this policy can automatically flag it for archiving or deletion, permanently removing stale data from Copilot's grounding index.
That's huge.
Then there is the site ownership policy. This solves the orphan site crisis. If the two owners of a SharePoint site leave the company, that site becomes a ghost ship. No one is managing access.
That's drifting out there.
Yeah. This policy detects the lack of active owners and automatically prompts active members of the site to nominate a new owner. Finally, you have the Site Access Review, or attestation policy, which forces site owners to periodically review their membership lists and explicitly attest that every user still requires access for business purposes.
Okay, the exam introduces a massive distractor here by constantly putting SharePoint Advanced Management and Microsoft Purview in the same multiple choice list.
They love doing that.
How does a candidate mechanically differentiate between a problem SAM solves and a problem Purview solves?
You have to look at what the exam scenario is trying to secure. You have to ask yourself, are you trying to secure the container, or are you trying to secure the data inside the container?
Okay, break that down.
SharePoint Advanced Management manages the container. It manages the site access, the sharing links, the inactive libraries. Microsoft Purview manages the data itself, regardless of where it lives. Purview applies the encryption label to the actual Word document.
Oh, I see.
If you want to lock down the room, use SAM. If you want to encrypt the files inside the briefcase sitting in the room, use Purview.
Let's drill into two specific containment tools within SAM that are guaranteed to be on the exam: Restricted Access Control RAC and Restricted Content Discovery RCD. Let's take RAC first. Why wouldn't an admin just manually fix the permissions on a messy site instead of using RAC?
Because manually untangling a web of broken permissions on a site with 50,000 files is mathematically impossible for a human admin.
It would take years.
Over 5 years, users have created thousands of individual sharing links and broken inheritances. Restricted Access Control, or RAC, allows the administrator to bypass all of that file-level chaos and drop a hard perimeter around the entire site container.
How does it work mechanically?
When you configure RAC, you specify a security group, let's say, legal department. RAC instructs the SharePoint backend that only members of the legal department group can access this site, period.
Even if someone has a direct link?
Even if a user outside the legal department has a direct anyone with a link URL to a file buried deep in that site, RAC evaluates their identity at the container boundary, sees they aren't in the RAC group, and denies access.
Wow.
And Copilot respects this instantly, meaning it will immediately stop grounding prompts using data from that site for unauthorized users.
That is a hard block. But what if the business requirement is different? What if we don't want to lock users out of the site entirely? That brings us to restricted content discovery, or RCD.
Right. RCD serves a completely different architectural purpose. With RCD, the goal is not to revoke human access.
Okay, give me an example.
You might have a site containing raw, unverified financial data that the accounting team needs to access daily to do their jobs. You don't want to lock them out. But you've decided that this specific raw data is too sensitive, or perhaps too inaccurate, to be processed by an AI and summarized into corporate reports.
So you just want to hide it from Copilot.
Exactly. When you apply RCD to a site or document library, you are essentially telling the Microsoft Graph to stop indexing this content for Copilot. The users keep their normal business access. They can click the files, edit the spreadsheets, and do their jobs. But the content becomes completely invisible to Copilot's orchestration service. Copilot cannot discover it, read it, or use it to generate answers.
Okay, let's test the mechanics of this with an exam scenario. A tenant contains a highly sensitive human resources SharePoint site used for executive compensation planning. The administrator discovers that over the past 2 years, several specific compensation spreadsheets have been inadvertently shared with managers outside of HR via direct item-level sharing links. Yeah. The administrator needs an immediate solution that guarantees absolutely no one outside the executive HR security group can access the site or surface its content via Copilot. This solution must completely override and neutralize any of those existing stray file-level sharing links. Which tool should the admin deploy?
The operative phrase in that scenario is that it must guarantee absolutely no one outside the group can access the site. We are talking about revoking access to the container itself. Therefore, the correct tool is RAC, Restricted Access Control.
Okay, but I'm going to push back on that. If the problem is that Copilot might surface the compensation data, why couldn't I just apply Restricted Content Discovery RCD? Wouldn't that hide the data from the AI?
It would hide the data from the AI, but it fails the primary requirement of the scenario. RCD does not block human access. If you only deployed RCD, a manager who has saved one of those stray direct sharing links from 2 years ago could still paste that link into their browser, bypass the AI entirely, open the spreadsheet, and read the executive compensation data manually.
Because RCD only hides it from the orchestration service.
Right. To guarantee no access, you need the hard perimeter of RAC. Think of RAC as a massive steel bank vault door securing the entire room. If you aren't on the approved list, you cannot get past the door, regardless of what keys you hold for the filing cabinets inside.
And RCD.
RCD, on the other hand, is like throwing an invisibility cloak over a specific desk inside the room. Authorized users can still walk into the room and do their jobs, but the AI assistant cannot see what is under the cloak. In this scenario, because of the stray links, we need the vault door.
That distinction between the vault door and the invisibility cloak is exactly how you eliminate the wrong answers on the test. Let's move from the container to the data itself. We've locked down the SharePoint sites using SAM. Now let's secure the actual intellectual property using Microsoft Purview and DSPM for AI.
Microsoft Purview is the data security and compliance engine for the entire ecosystem. Its core mission is to discover, protect, and govern data at the item level. With the introduction of Copilot, Purview expanded its capabilities with data security posture management for AI, or DSPM for AI.
Why did Microsoft have to build an entirely new posture management tool just for AI? I mean, weren't the existing Purview tools enough?
The mechanics of data exfiltration changed fundamentally with generative AI. Before Copilot, if a malicious insider wanted to steal sensitive data, they had to manually search SharePoint, open individual documents, copy the text, and paste it somewhere else.
It was slow.
It was a slow, noisy process that generated a lot of traditional autologs. Now, a user can write a single, well-crafted prompt, and Copilot's orchestration service will instantly aggregate sensitive data from across 50 different documents in seconds.
That is terrifying.
It is. Furthermore, users might take highly sensitive corporate data and paste it into unsanctioned third-party consumer AI tools on the web, a massive risk known as shadow AI. DSPM for AI provides the specialized telemetry needed to govern this new paradigm. It discovers AI-related risks, tracks when sensitive data is being processed through prompts, and gives administrators visibility into shadow AI usage.
Within Purview, the exam relies heavily on a three-way trap: confusing the distinct mechanical purposes of sensitivity labels, data loss prevention DLP, and retention policies. Candidates constantly mix these up.
Let's dissect them mechanically, starting with sensitivity labels. A sensitivity label provides persistent cryptographic protection that is fundamentally stitched into the metadata and fabric of the file itself.
It's part of the file.
Yes. When an admin configures a label, let's call it Project Apollo Highly Confidential, they can embed AES 256 encryption directly into the label policy. If a user applies that label to a Word document, the file is encrypted.
And it stays encrypted.
It doesn't matter where that file goes. It can be emailed to a competitor, downloaded to an unmanaged USB drive, or uploaded to a personal cloud storage account. If an unauthorized person double-clicks that file, the file mathematically calls home to Microsoft Entra.
It literally checks in.
It says, the user trying to open me needs to provide an access token, proving they have the Project Apollo authorization. If Entra denies the token, the file remains ciphertext. It refuses to open.
That's powerful.
And crucially for the AB-900 exam, Copilot outputs automatically inherit the sensitivity label of the source files.
Wait, really?
Oh yeah. If Copilot summarizes that encrypted Project Apollo document, the resulting summary generated in the chat window is automatically tagged with the exact same Project Apollo label and encryption.
Okay, but if the label encrypts the file so powerfully, why do we need data loss prevention or DLP? I hear this question constantly from candidates. If the file is encrypted and calls home to Entra, who cares if they download it to a USB drive? DLP seems redundant.
It seems redundant until you understand the mechanics of data exfiltration. Sensitivity labels protect the file if it escapes, but you still want to prevent the escape in the first place.
Oh.
Data loss prevention is the perimeter checkpoint. It does not alter the file, it inspects the transit action. A DLP policy sits at the Exchange email gateway or on the Windows endpoint clipboard, scanning data in real time.
So it's watching the movement.
Exactly. If a user tries to attach a file containing 500 credit card numbers to a personal Gmail email, the DLP policy scans the payload, recognizes the sensitive information type, and actively blocks the network transmission.
So DLP is like the bouncer?
Yes. It is the bouncer at the door of the nightclub, stopping the stolen good from leaving the building. The label is the security tag permanently attached to the goods, just in case they manage to sneak past the bouncer. You need both.
And what role do retention policies play in this trio?
Retention policies have absolutely zero to do with preventing immediate data leakage or unauthorized access. Retention is purely a lifecycle mechanism designed for legal compliance and storage management.
It's just a timer.
Basically. A retention policy answers two programmatic questions. How many years are we legally mandated to preserve this data to satisfy regulators? And once that mandate expires, when are we required to permanently destroy the data to reduce our legal liability?
Let's combine these Purview concepts into a complex exam scenario. An employee has submitted their resignation and is scheduled to leave the organization in 2 weeks. This employee currently holds authorized, legitimate access to a highly sensitive SharePoint site containing proprietary source code and client lists.
Okay, high risk.
Very. The administrator notices a sudden, massive spike in the user's Copilot activity. The user is writing prompts to rapidly summarize and aggregate huge lists of high-profile client contacts and project details.
Right.
The user is technically allowed to view this data, so no access rules are being broken, but the behavior is highly anomalous and suspicious given their impending departure. Which Purview tools are required to detect this pattern, and how does the admin investigate the actual AI interaction?
This scenario tests your ability to handle the misuse of authorized access. The user isn't hacking. They are exploiting their legitimate permissions. Because they are authorized, standard DLP or conditional access might not flag the underlying access as malicious.
So what triggers the flag?
To detect the anomalous pattern itself, the administrator needs to rely on insider risk management within Purview. Insider risk management utilizes machine learning to build a baseline of what normal behavior looks like for that specific user.
It learns their habits.
Right. When the user suddenly deviates from that baseline by using Copilot to rapidly aggregate and exfiltrate massive amounts of sensitive data right before their resignation date, insider risk management triggers a high-severity alert.
But Insider Risk just gives you the alert. It says, anomalous volume of data access. How does the administrator prove what the user was actually doing with the AI?
That is where the administrator pivots from insider risk management directly into DSPM for AI, specifically utilizing the AI Activity Explorer.
The Activity Explorer?
The Activity Explorer provides the exact granular telemetry of the AI session. The administrator can drill into the logs and see the precise text of the prompts the user was feeding into Copilot, the exact generated responses the LLM provided, and the specific SharePoint files the orchestration service referenced to build those responses.
It's the full audit trail.
Yes. The admin gets the complete forensic context to prove the user was weaponizing Copilot for data theft.
That forensic capability is incredible, but all this processing power, the orchestration service, the LLM reasoning, the Purview scanning it, comes at a cost. The AB-900 exam transitions from security into resource management, specifically licensing, pay-as-you-go models, and prompt governance.
Administrators are no longer just managing a single flat-rate license. Microsoft introduced flexibility, which means admins have to manage complex billing architectures.
You've got the standard license.
You have the standard Copilot monthly license, which operates on a fixed cost per user per month. It is predictable and easy for procurement to budget. But you also have the pay-as-you-go model.
And that's where the trap is.
Pay-as-you-go allows an organization to only pay for the actual AI compute resources consumed. It is incredibly flexible for part-time users or seasonal project teams, but mechanically, it requires a drastically higher level of administrative vigilance.
Because flexibility without governance leads to catastrophic billing surprises.
Okay.
Let's run a scenario on this. An organization decides to run a pilot program for Copilot using the pay-as-you-go model, assigning it to their 50-person marketing department.
Okay.
At the end of the first billing cycle, the IT director receives an unexpected invoice showing a massive cost spike that completely obliterates the quarterly IT budget. What is the precise administrative response required to remediate this and prevent it from happening again?
If an admin tries to solve a pay-as-you-go billing crisis in the M365 Admin Center, they will fail the scenario.
Totally wrong, Cordell.
The M365 Admin Center handles the assignment of the license, but the financial mechanics of consumption billing are processed in Azure. The administrator must immediately navigate to Azure Cost Management.
Step 1.
The first step is to establish hard billing budgets and configure proactive alerts. You do not want to find out about a cost overrun at the end of the month. You configure Azure Cost Management to send an alert the moment consumption hits 75% of the allocated budget.
But how do they figure out who in the marketing department is actually driving up the bill?
That is step 2, scoping the pay-as-you-go policies by resource group or department. You implement departmental billing tags so the telemetry shows exactly which team and which specific users are consuming the compute cycles.
And step 3.
Step 3 is cost optimization. The admin analyzes the Azure Cost Management reports and discovers that 3 specific marketing analysts are running highly complex generative prompts 8 hours a day, generating 90% of the cost.
What's the fix?
The administrative fix is to transition those 3 heavy users off the pay-as-you-go model and assign them fixed standard monthly Copilot licenses to stabilize their cost while leaving the light users on the consumption model.
Cost management is one side of the coin. The other is prompt governance. The exam expects candidates to understand that prompts are no longer just ephemeral chat messages that disappear when the window closes.
Not at all. Prompts have evolved into critical organizational assets. If a financial analyst spends 3 weeks refining a complex, multi-step prompt that perfectly aggregates weekly regional sales data, cross-references it with inventory, and generates a formatted executive summary,
that prompt is gold.
that prompt is highly valuable intellectual property. Prompt governance means managing these assets administratively. It involves establishing strict naming conventions for shared prompt libraries, so users know exactly what a prompt does.
You need to know who owns it, too.
Yes, it means assigning administrative owners to maintain the prompts, ensuring they don't break when underlying SharePoint data structures change. And critically, it involves security reviews to ensure users aren't hard-coding sensitive. Personally identifiable information directly into the prompt templates themselves.
We also have to address the mechanics of web search within Copilot. A major concern for administrators and a heavily tested concept is the fear that Copilot is taking sensitive internal prompts and broadcasting them to the public internet via Bing.
This is the web grounding feature, and you must understand how the sanitization mechanism works.
Right.
By default, Copilot is allowed to query the public web to pull in real-time information to enrich its responses.
But it doesn't just send the whole prompt, right?
No. The orchestration service does not just take the user's raw, unedited prompt and paste it into a Bing search bar. The prompt never leaves the Microsoft 365 security boundary intact.
So what does it do?
Instead, Copilot uses an entity extraction process, It strips out user identifiers, strips out the sensitive internal context, and synthesizes a very short, targeted search query. It sends only that sanitized query to the web, retrieves the public data, brings it back inside the secure tenant boundary, and merges it with the internal graph data to formulate the final answer.
And administrators have control over this.
Absolutely. Administratively, you can use policy to toggle web search on or off entirely. And for compliance, you have web query transparency, which means the admin can audit the exact sanitized short queries that Copilot is sending externally.
Before we leave the section, we need to eliminate two rapid-fire conceptual traps. First, the mechanical difference between a license and a permission.
This is fundamental to troubleshooting access issues. Assigning a Copilot license to a user simply provisions the feature. It activates the Copilot icon in their Word ribbon or Teams interface.
It just turns it on.
A license does absolutely nothing to dictate what underlying data that user is allowed to process. Permissions dictate data visibility. If an executive has a premium Copilot license but lacks the SharePoint permissions to read a specific financial site, Copilot cannot access that site for them. License equals feature activation. Permission equals data access.
The second trap, usage reporting versus compliance evidence.
If a scenario asks an admin to demonstrate to the executive board that the organization is achieving return on investment by showing how many employees are actively clicking the Copilot button, the admin uses the M365 usage reports.
That just shows adoption metrics.
Right. Usage reports show aggregated adoption metrics, active users, total messages sent. However, if the scenario involves a legal hold or a regulatory audit demanding proof of exactly what a specific user did with Copilot on a Tuesday afternoon, usage reports are entirely useless.
You need the actual forensic data.
You need immutable compliance evidence, which dictates routing the request to Purview eDiscovery or the Purview audit logs to extract the forensic interaction records.
That perfectly sets up our transition into the next major phase of the exam architecture. Up until now, we have been discussing Copilot primarily as a reactive personal assistant, but the exam shifts gears heavily into the architecture of agents. What is the fundamental mechanical difference between Copilot Chat and an agent?
It is a complete behavioral shift from reactive to proactive. Copilot Chat is deeply reactive. It is in-the-moment personal productivity. It sits idle, waiting for the human to drive the interaction.
Draft this email or summarize this PDF.
Right. It operates solely on behalf of that single user in that specific moment. Agents, however, are designed for proactive, repeatable workflows and automated business processes. They're programmed to operate on behalf of a team, a department, or an entire system. They execute standardized logic rather than just answering ad hoc questions.
The AB-900 exam categorizes agents into 3 distinct tiers of complexity, and you need to know the limitations and deployment mechanics of each. Let's start with pre-built agents.
Pre-built agents are turnkey solutions provided directly by Microsoft. They require zero development. The 2 critical ones to identify for the exam are the researcher agent, which is algorithmically optimized for deep multi-source web and data research, and the analyst agent, which is specifically tuned for complex mathematical reasoning and data analysis, often interacting directly with structured data sets like Excel.
So the admin's job is really just managing access.
The admin's job here is simply to enable them and manage which users have access to leverage them.
The middle tier is where the exam really focuses. SharePoint agents.
SharePoint agents represent the democratization of AI. They bridge the gap between a simple personal chat and a complex, coded custom agent. A SharePoint agent is heavily restricted and content-specific.
Who builds them?
A user with appropriate edit rights creates the agent directly within the user interface of a specific SharePoint site or document library. Mechanically, the agent is grounded only in that specific location. It cannot search the rest of the tenant.
And there are hard limits you have to memorize for the exam.
Yes, for the exam, you must memorize the hard limits. A SharePoint agent can be grounded in a maximum of 20 distinct sources, such as specific folders or files within that site, and the creator can configure a maximum of 3 starter prompts to guide users on how to interact with it.
And the top tier, the deep end of the pool, is advanced or custom agents.
Custom agents are built outside of SharePoint, inside Copilot Studio. This is where you introduce true workflow automation. Custom agents are not limited to just reading documents. They utilize external API connectors, custom programmatic logic, and conditional actions to interact with multiple different systems.
They can actually do things.
Exactly. A custom agent can query a third-party ticketing system, analyze the data, and automatically update a database based on the results.
How does an administrator mechanically scale governance across these different tiers? I mean, it can't be the same for all of them.
It's not. Governance scales linearly with the complexity and reach of the agent. A SharePoint agent that is only grounded in an employee handbook library requires very basic governance. The admin simply reviews the site's SharePoint permissions to ensure only authorized employees can access the library. The agent relies entirely on those existing permissions.
But an advanced agent?
However, an advanced custom agent built in Copilot Studio that uses a REST API connector to read and write data to an external HR payroll system. That requires intense governance. It requires formal IT approval, a deep security review of the API connector's authentication methods, and strict lifecycle management to ensure the agent doesn't execute unauthorized financial transactions.
Let's test this tiered architecture with a scenario. A regional sales department wants to deploy a standardized Q&A tool specifically trained on their internal pricing policy documents, which are all located within a single dedicated SharePoint site.
What? Single site.
The department needs this tool deployed by Friday. However, nobody in the sales department has any coding skills, and the department head has absolutely zero remaining budget to purchase premium Power Platform licenses. What is the most appropriate architectural solution?
You have to map the constraints. The constraints are a single site grounding location, no coding skills, rapid deployment, and no budget for premium licenses.
Right, so we eliminate options based on that.
Copilot Studio custom agents fail because they require Power Platform licensing and development time. Pre-built agents fail because they aren't grounded exclusively in that custom pricing policy site.
So that leaves.
The correct answer is a SharePoint agent. It perfectly fits the mechanics of the scenario. A sales manager with edit rights can generate the agent directly from the document library UI in minutes. It requires zero code, it respects the existing SharePoint site permissions natively, and it does not trigger any premium Power Platform licensing costs.
But if an organization does have the budget and the need for complex workflows, they are moving into Copilot Studio. This brings us to custom agent lifecycle and Power Platform governance. Building in Copilot Studio is not a deploy it and forget it process.
Absolutely not. An advanced agent has a strict software development lifecycle: creation, testing, approval, publishing, and monitoring. Within the Copilot Studio interface, makers have two primary mechanical pathways for creation.
Describe and configure.
Yes. The Describe tab allows a user to build the foundational logic of the agent using natural language. They simply type out the desired behavior, and the AI generates the framework. But for the advanced configurations, makers use the Configure tab.
That's where you get your hands dirty.
This is where they get under the hood to manually adjust conversational branching logic, bind API connectors, and fine-tune the system instructions.
Once these custom agents start proliferating across the tenant, how does the administrator maintain visibility? What is the mechanical tool for governance here?
Visibility is maintained through the agent inventory, located within the M365 Admin Center.
Okay, the inventory.
The agent inventory is the central dashboard. It lists every custom agent that has been built across the environment. It details the specific data sources each agent is grounded in, and crucially, it lists the custom actions and API connectors each agent is authorized to execute.
So if you see something shady.
If an administrator discovers an agent that violates corporate compliance, perhaps it's connecting to an unsanctioned external database, they can use the agent inventory to immediately block or permanently delete the agent.
The inventory also surfaces a critical security metric, agent protection status.
Yes, agent protection status is your early warning system for AI-specific vulnerabilities. It uses back-end telemetry to identify if an agent is susceptible to prompt injection attacks or jailbreak risks.
Explain what a cross-prompt injection is for the exam.
A cross-prompt injection occurs when a malicious user crafts a document designed to trick the agent's LLM into ignoring its system instructions, perhaps tricking it into bypassing a security filter or revealing sensitive back-end data when it summarizes the file. The protection status alerts the administrator that the agent's instructions need to be hardened against these adversarial attacks.
Now, let's dissect the most common access trap regarding Copilot Studio, the two-step access rule. Let's frame it as an exam scenario. A senior developer has a valid Microsoft 365 Copilot license assigned to their account. They utilize Copilot Chat flawlessly every single day.
Okay, so the license works.
Exactly. However, when they navigate to Copilot Studio to begin building a custom agent for their team, the Create an Agent button is completely grayed out. The developer submits a ticket claiming the system is broken. What is the mechanical reason for this denial of access?
The developer, and often the exam candidate, assumes that a Copilot license grants universal access to the entire AI ecosystem. That is false. Building custom agents requires passing the two-step access rule.
What's step 1?
Step 1. The user must possess the appropriate Copilot Studio licensing. But step 2 is where they fail. The user must be explicitly assigned the environment maker role within the Power Platform Admin Center for the specific environment they are attempting to build in.
Power Platform role.
Copilot Studio sits on top of the Power Platform architecture. If the Power Platform administrator has not granted that user the environment maker role, this system physically locks them out of creation, keeping the button grayed out regardless of their Copilot license.
Let's hit another lifecycle scenario, one concerning maintenance. A highly complex, business-critical production agent that automatically handles and routes IT help desk tickets suddenly stops functioning correctly.
Uh-oh, production is down.
Yeah. Upon investigation, the administrator realizes the agent has no registered owner because the original developer abruptly left the company 3 weeks ago and their Entra account was deleted. What is the precise administrative action required?
An ownerless agent in a production environment is a severe governance failure because it means no one is receiving error alerts, maintaining the API connectors, or managing the lifecycle update.
So what's the fix?
The administrator must immediately navigate to the agent inventory, use the filtering tools to identify the ownerless agent, and administratively reassign ownership to a current active member of the IT staff so the maintenance lifecycle can resume.
We also need to draw a hard line between two distinct lifecycle phases that candidates confuse. Approving an agent versus publishing an agent. They sound like the same action, but in a governed tenant, they are entirely separate administrative gates.
I explain the difference using a restaurant construction analogy. Approving an agent is the equivalent of passing the city building inspection. The IT governance team reviews the agent's architecture, scrutinizes the external data connectors for data exfiltration risks, evaluates the system prompts, and officially stamps it as approved for corporate use.
But that doesn't mean it's open for business.
Exactly. Passing the building inspection does not mean customers can walk in and order food. Publishing the agent is the act of unlocking the front doors and making it live and accessible to end users in Copilot Chat or Teams.
So publishing comes after approval.
In a strictly governed Power Platform environment, the system mechanically prevents a maker from publishing an agent until it has achieved approval status. Furthermore, the lifecycle is iterative.
What do you mean by iterative?
If the maker goes back into Copilot Studio and updates the agent's instructions or adds a new connector, they must navigate the approval and publishing process again. The users will continue to interact with the old, cached version of the agent until the new version is officially republished and reshared.
That restaurant analogy perfectly illustrates the governance gates. We are now moving into our final major architectural topic, the Copilot Control System, roles, and the mechanics of measuring adoption and ROI.
Microsoft frames the entire administrative experience around the Copilot Control System. You need to recognize its 3 foundational pillars: security, management, and measurement.
A deployment fails if it lacks any of the 3.
Exactly. You secure the underlying data using Purview and SAM. You manage the access and agent lifecycle using Entra and the M365 Admin Center. And finally, you measure the telemetry to prove the system is actually delivering value.
To facilitate this management pillar without violating zero trust, Microsoft introduced a highly specific administrative role. Why was the AI administrator role created, and what problem does it mechanically solve?
It solves the problem of overprivileged access. Before this role was fully integrated, if a compliance officer or a department head simply needed to access the Copilot dashboard to review adoption analytics, or if an IT staffer needed to manage agent approvals in the inventory, they frequently had to be granted global administrator rights.
Which is crazy.
Handing out global admin rights just to let someone read a chart is a massive violation of the principle of least privilege. The AI administrator role is a specialized, scoped role.
So what does it actually let you do?
It grants the precise permissions required to manage general Copilot settings, review analytics dashboards, and govern the agent inventory, without granting the user the ability to reset the CEO's password or delete Exchange mailboxes.
As organizations roll out the technology, the exam expects you to understand the standardized adoption roadmap. It is a structured 4-phase methodology.
The 4 phases are pilot, deploy, operate, and extend. You never deploy to 50,000 users on day 1. You start with a small pilot group to stress test your governance controls, validate your purview labels, and identify high-value use cases.
And once the pilot is successful,
Once the architecture holds, you deploy to the broader organization. The operate phase involves continuous daily monitoring of usage telemetry and refining your administrative policies based on real-world behavior. Finally, the extent phase represents maturity. The organization moves beyond just using basic Copilot Chat and begins building advanced custom agents to transform complex multi-system business processes.
Which brings us to the ultimate reporting trap on the exam. Candidates frequently fail to distinguish between the mechanics of measuring adoption versus measuring ROI. They treat them as the same metric.
They are completely different metrics requiring completely different tools. Adoption is a binary measurement of technical usage. Is the feature turned on and our fingers clicking the keys?
So how do you measure adoption?
To measure adoption, the administrator looks at the M365 Admin Center usage reports. It tracks active users and the volume of messages sent. If you bought 500 licenses and the report shows 450 users are sending at least one prompt a day, you have achieved high adoption.
But high adoption does not mathematically equal return on investment.
Right. ROI measures business impact and efficiency. Are those 450 users actually saving time, or are they just wasting an hour a day arguing with the AI?
So what's the tool for ROI?
To measure ROI, the administrator must utilize advanced analytical tools like Viva Insights or the specialized Copilot dashboard. These tools analyze sentiment, calculate estimated meeting hours saved, and quantify the actual business impact of the deployment.
Let's solidify this with our final exam scenario. An organization excitedly purchases 500 premium Copilot licenses. 3 months post-deployment, the executive sponsor checks the M365 Admin Center and sees that adoption is completely stalling. Only 45 out of the 500 licensed users are actively sending prompts.
Not good.
The executive is furious and demands IT fix the AI. What is the necessary administrative response to rescue this deployment?
The first thing the administrator must communicate is that simply purchasing and assigning a license is not an adoption strategy. If usage is stalling, the AI isn't technically broken, the workforce just doesn't know how to integrate it into their workflow.
So where do they start?
The administrator needs to pivot from the basic M365 Admin Center usage reports and dig deep into the Copilot dashboard to analyze the behavioral trends of those 45 active users. What specific tasks are they succeeding at?
You find the bright spots.
Yes. The admin must then use that data to deploy internal champions across the departments. They must ensure the workforce receives comprehensive training on prompt engineering, teaching them that prompts are assets. Finally, the admin needs to interview the departments that aren't using Copilot to identify complex workflow gaps.
Because maybe chat isn't what they need.
It is entirely possible that the sales team isn't using personal Copilot Chat because their daily workflow requires querying an external database, which means the administrator needs to transition them from the reactive Copilot to a proactive custom agent built in Copilot Studio. You cannot just turn on the switch. You have to architect the value.
Architecting the value. That's the perfect summarization. As we wrap up this exhaustive final cram session, what is your ultimate strategic advice for a candidate sitting in that exam chair, staring down a complex paragraph-long scenario question on the AB-900?
My final strategy is this. Do not panic at the length of the scenario. Slow down and aggressively deconstruct the text to find the fundamental root of the administrative problem. The entire exam comes down to categorization. Ask yourself, is the question asking for a security fix?
Right. If it is about encrypting data or stopping a leak.
Immediately eliminate any answers that don't involve Purview or Defender. Is the scenario asking for a cost fix? Immediately look for Azure Cost Management or licensing models. Is it asking for an access fix to a container that points you directly toward Entra, PIM, or SharePoint Advanced Management?
Don't just memorize button names.
Exactly. Do not waste your mental energy just memorizing the names of buttons in a portal. Focus relentlessly on the mechanical why. If you understand why the orchestration service behaves the way it does, or why a sensitivity label uses cryptographic handshakes, you will spot the distractor answers a mile away because they will mechanically fail to solve the scenario's problem.
Focus on the mechanics. Focus on the why.
And as a final thought before we sign off, I want to leave you with something to ponder that extends beyond the current boundaries of the AB-900 exam, but is hurtling toward us rapidly. Throughout this session, we have focused heavily on governing agents that primarily retrieve and summarize information.
But the architecture is shifting.
It really is. As custom agents evolve from simple retrieval tools into truly autonomous entities, agents programmed with the logic to execute complex workflows, approve supply chain requests, or even spend corporate funds across external APIs without a human explicitly clicking approve, the fundamental nature of the administrator's job will mutate.
It's a whole new world.
We are transitioning from merely managing access to data to actively managing AI, autonomy, and trust. How is your organization architecturally preparing to govern an agent that possesses the autonomy to act on its own volition? It is the most fascinating and terrifying administrative challenge of the next decade.
Managing autonomy, that is where the industry is going.
It absolutely is. Thank you for spending this hour with us in the admin study room. We know you have the mechanical knowledge to crush this exam. As a final reminder, this episode is a study aid, not official exam guidance. Always verify important details against the latest Microsoft documentation. Best of luck on the AB-900 exam. Trust your preparation, and we'll see you next.